Hey up me duck, it's Links Live's Natters time, where your stories come alive. From the fens to the coast. So grab a cuppa and relax with your go-to podcast for unique Lincolnshire stories.
Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Links Live's Natters podcast. Today's guest is waiting in our waiting room, ready to chat to us today. Today's guest, tell us who you are.
Hello, Shelley. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. My name is Becky Jones and I am a sleep practitioner working within Lincolnshire.
Thank you so much for chatting, or as we like to say, nattering to us today, Becky.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The reason we have Becky on is because I had been looking at some other social media sites and I came across this lady and she was running this particular club and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. But Becky actually beat me to the mark and Becky messaged me to talk about something she's doing in Lincolnshire. I know it sounds a bit cryptic, but Becky, what are you up to?
I'm trying to spread the word about sleep within Lincolnshire. And I know that's something that everybody does every day. And it's a fundamental human need. But I believe there's a lack of education around sleep and the importance of sleep. So what I'm trying to do is educate people on the importance of sleep, the impact of sleep disturbances, and also the impact of sleep deprivation.
Yeah, I mean, have you actually faced sort of any challenges within your family sort of regarding sleep deprivation?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of years ago now, my youngest child, she's 5 now, when she was 2, she was waking up every single morning at 3 o'clock.
Wow.
Hence the reason why the sleep practitioner company that I've set up is called the 3 a.m. Club, because my husband and I would take it in turns to be awake at 3 o'clock every single morning, because she would wake up and that would be her set for the day. So we were just absolutely, as a family, completely exhausted. And I was, yeah, at the end of my tether. I didn't quite know what to do with her because they say when you have children to expect to lose out on sleep, but 2 years in, I was like, this can't keep happening. Something needs to change here. It was quite challenging. It was a challenging time for us as a family.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think it was crucial for children's development and overall family well-being that you address this issue? Because like you say, it had to stop, didn't it?
Well, it had to. And I mean, bless her, she was able to go to nursery and she could get some sleep at nursery, whereas my husband and I, we would then be up for the day and we would have to work, and our tank was empty. We were just completely exhausted. And my other role is that of a primary school teacher. So I would have to go into school, be happy and cheerful, and inside I was just absolutely exhausted. So yeah, it definitely, it was a frustrating time for us as a family, but also it was quite testing for all of us.
So basically, it was having quite a detrimental effect on your lives, wasn't it? Because like you say, you're caring for your child, and then you're going into work, and then there's obviously the relationship with your husband as well, isn't there?
Yeah, completely. And we were both worried about her as well at the time, because obviously as adults we could cope with not having sleep. We were aware that we were feeling the way we were because we were tired, but it was an unsettling time for my daughter because she didn't really understand why she was so emotional and why she was finding trying to get to sleep such a challenge, because she was completely exhausted.
Yeah, is this what inspired you to become a sort of sleep practitioner?
Not really at the time. At the time, I just accepted that that was a season of our life and that hopefully she would grow out of it. The inspirations come from being a teacher. So, alongside being a primary school teacher, another role that I have within the school that I work in is that of a SENDCO. That stands for a Special Educational Needs Coordinator. And I work with lots of families on a daily basis, and they will come to me with concerns they have around their child and their learning. And one particular theme that kept reoccurring with the families that I'm working with, and this was for children with additional needs and children without additional needs, is the fact that the parents were struggling with their child's sleep. And one of the roles that I have as a SENDCO is to connect families with outside agencies that can support them and their child. So when the parents would come to me and they would say, "Oh, I'm struggling with my child's sleep," I would direct them to the Sleep Charity website, which is an amazing website that's got lots of information on there. But when I was looking for services actually within Lincolnshire, there was very, very limited places that I could tell the parents to go to. And it was concerning me because I could completely empathize with the lack of sleep and how much that impacted the family. I decided to address the situation, and so I qualified as a sleep practitioner so that I would be able to understand greater what was going on with children's sleep and how I could help and advise those parents with the children that do have sleep disturbances.
Yeah, do you think there is sort of like current challenges in accessing sleep support in Lincolnshire? Do you think there is a sort of lack of support, obviously, because you mentioned that you'd seen it in children in schools before?
I think there's a huge lack of support, but I think primarily the main issue is there's a lack of education around sleep, what sleep deprivation looks like in children, because you wouldn't necessarily expect a child who's presenting themselves as sleep deprived to behave in the way that you see. For example, a child who is sleep deprived often is hyperactive. And that's not necessarily what you would associate with somebody who is exhausted. You would think, oh, they're a little bit withdrawn, but that's not what you see in children. And so I my concern is parents probably don't necessarily know that their child is sleep deprived and that there is just a lack of education around it. And so I think that's one of the main concerns within Lincolnshire, is that it's not being spoken about enough.
Do you think children are being misdiagnosed in sort of like, well, we'd like to say the country, sort of Lincolnshire, mistakenly for behavioural disorders like ADHD, and it's actually sleep deprivation?
So ADHD in children has got the traits within ADHD are very similar to what you would see in a sleep deprived child. Obviously, not all children present themselves in the same way, but generally, ADHD traits tend to be hyperactivity, struggles with emotional regulation, um, inability to retain information, cognition and learning issues, and it can also um, present in different behaviors. And if you compare that to the traits of sleep deprivation in a child who is sleep deprived may represent themselves as hyperactive. Again, they're struggling to deal with their emotional regulation. They've got an inability to retain information because of the exhaustion, and they can also have learning and cognition issues. And also, behavior issues can come into that as well. So it makes me wonder how many of these children are being misdiagnosed as potentially having ADHD when actually it could be sleep deprivation, or if they do have ADHD, if those traits are being highlighted even more because of the sleep deprivation. And I think it's just about having that conversation with people and saying, what is your child's sleep like? Is that having an impact on them on a day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, talking about sort of like the community and local authorities, do you think better family support could be a key to helping these parents understand? Like you've mentioned, more education, things like that. We need more
Definitely.
support, more resources out there on a community sort of county level.
I definitely think that's something that should be considered by the local authority. At the moment, if you have concerns that your child might potentially have ADHD, you have to go through the community paediatrics. Now, for that referral to get accepted, it's quite a high threshold. And
Wow.
if it does get accepted, it can take 9 months to get the initial appointment.
So it's
Uh,
frustrating for parents then.
Completely frustrating. And I believe that perhaps one route around this problem could be that if parents are concerned about their child's hyperactivity or struggles with their emotional irregulation, cognition and learning issues, perhaps maybe having workshops around sleep deprivation and understanding the science of sleep would help, because potentially it could be sleep deprivation is making these traits heightened. So I do think that if the local authority were to put on workshops and information around the importance of sleep in children and the impact of sleep deprivation, it might help some of those parents who are struggling with some of those traits that I've just spoken about.
What sort of top tips could you give to a parent struggling? Or say, for example, I have a child that just like, if we go with like the old wives' tales, common misconceptions in children, because like some of the old wives' tales would be like, if you send a child to bed, say later at night, they'll sleep in the morning. But I know from an example, somebody close to me, he would put his children to bed sort of like still quite late, and they'd still be up at the crack of dawn, especially with when the clocks go back, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge misconception. Unfortunately, a sign of sleep deprivation in a child is early wakings as well. So, by people thinking if they put their child to bed later, they'll sleep in later, that usually doesn't tend to be the case. The child will wake up earlier because they're struggling to link their sleep cycles together, and therefore they're waking up even earlier, which is just impacting the problem even more. There's so many misconceptions around sleep, and this is where I think the education of it is so important, and people having those conversations and talking about it and understanding a little bit more about the science behind sleep will really help people to start to reflect on their own child's sleep and where potential problems could be lying.
Yeah, because do you see sort of like when the seasons change? Because obviously we just mentioned about the clocks going back and forwards. Do you think that's quite a sort of a bit of a tough time? Is that something you've seen when you've done your studies and stuff? Certain times of the year really are worse for parents.
Absolutely. I know myself with my own child in the summertime. My eldest one is quite switched on. He's like, why am I going to bed when it's daylight outside? And I'm like, no, I understand that, but it's still your bedtime. So yeah, the seasonal changes can cause problems when it comes to sleep. I mean, this is where I encourage parents to really consider the sleep environment that their child's in. So having a dark room with blackout blinds and blackout curtains is going to help with the summer months, because obviously it makes the room a lot more darker and it encourages the onset of sleep when it is darker. Um, yeah, so seasonal changes can cause problems when it does come to sleep.
At the Thrive Tribe, we believe everyone deserves the chance to soar. Whether you're an individual seeking self-improvement or a business aiming for success, we've got you covered. Personalized coaching. Unlock your potential with our expert coaches. One-on-one guidance tailored to your unique goals. Learn flexibly online. Boost your skills from Microsoft Office mastery to work-based expertise. Lifelong learning? We've got the keys. So whether you're an aspiring professional, a business leader, or simply hungry for growth, join the Thrive Tribe today. Visit thethrivetribe.com and let's ignite your journey. Remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. The Thrive Tribe, where potential meets possibility.
Also, I think technology plays a big part in sleep, not just children, but adults as well. Because as a generation now, we're all on our phones, aren't we? Even when we go to bed now at night, we're on our laptops, we're on our phones. And, one of the advice I've always been given is like, you need to switch your phone off a good hour before you go to bed. But a lot of people I know, Becky, they go to bed with their phones and they're still on their phones at night. So I imagine sort of like the challenge for parents trying to get technology off the children as well is quite hard.
Oh, absolutely. It's we all rely on screens constantly, don't we? Tell us what the time is, to rely on what the weather's going to be like to set our alarm clock. So yeah, screen time before bed can be a huge problem. I think potentially for older children, that have got the devices in their bedrooms. But I think also, if a child has got part of their bedtime routine is watching something on TV, that's absolutely fine. It's recommended that devices are turned off about an hour before going to bed, but it's also being aware of what it is they're watching. An example of this is my children absolutely love the TV program Gladiators. And I
Oh,
know
yes, we know the gladiators.
it's
Yes.
made a welcome comeback, hasn't it? And yeah, my two are absolutely have loved that series. If I expect my children to be able to go to sleep after watching an episode of Gladiators, I've got absolutely not a chance. They are so excited and pumped up after watching that program, and they're wanting to recreate all the various obstacles in the lounge afterwards. So, um,
I've never
if
thought of gladiators having that effect before. It's like, yes, I know they hype it up and they've got their hands waving and everything else. But I've never, I guess, because I haven't got children, I've never put that into perspective that the children want to build assault courses and
oh
different
yeah,
obstacles in the living room. It's just something I've never thought of, Becky.
yeah, no, they do. Well, my two certainly do anyway after watching it. But mine are 5 and 8, so they're still quite young, but they get so involved in it and they love it. But then if I'm expecting them to go to bed straight after watching a TV program that's got their adrenaline pumping, it's unrealistic of me. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are having TV as part of your child's bedtime routine, just consider what it is that they're watching. Is it something relaxing and calming, or is it something that's going to get that adrenaline pumping? Because that is going to have an impact on their bedtime routine. Like I say, it's a nightmare trying to get my two to bed if they've been watching something that's got them all
Okay.
excited.
I've never thought about that, Becky, at all. I suppose even in adults where you're watching something quite adrenaline inducing and you're on that bit of a, yes, I'm still quite high, but I'm not tired. But your body's saying one thing and your brain's doing another. And I guess it's like because the children are tired, but their brain is still constantly whirring because they're
Yeah.
still quite hyped up from running around and stuff. It's not something, that I'd sort of like even considered.
Yeah, the more stimulating the program is that they're watching, the harder it's going to be for them to relax when it comes to bedtime.
Yeah, so Becky's top tips for parents.
Oh, for at bedtime for their children, the first top tip would say is to reflect on the current bedtime routine. What elements have you currently got in your bedtime routine? Is it calming? Are you dimming the lights down? Part of dimming the lights is signaling to your body that bedtime is approaching, and therefore you start to release the hormone melatonin, which is known as the sleep hormone. So the more melatonin that we can produce, the easier it is for that child to hopefully fall asleep. Um, another question that I would be asking as well is, how consistent is your child's bedtime routine? Are they going to bed at a similar time every night? Even at the weekends, the more consistent a bedtime routine is, the more likely a child is going to embrace it, and the deeper the sleep will be because it's consistent and they like the routine. They understand what's going to happen next, and it'll be easier for them to fall asleep as well. Another top tip that I would, well, as we've previously mentioned, is just monitor if you are having TV as part of that bedtime routine. Try to turn it off an hour before bed and closely monitor what it is they're watching. Is it going to get their adrenaline pumping? Because if it is, it might be worth trying to find something a little bit more calming. Otherwise, you might have a hyperactive child on your hands at bedtime. And another top tip that I would also ask parents to consider is, how is your child getting to sleep? Many children actually rely on having something to help them fall asleep. So, for example, with my children, they've got this little Tony box that they like to listen to, and it tells them a story, and they enjoy having that to fall asleep to. Other children, it might be having a cuddly toy, a special cuddly toy that they're familiar with, and some children like to have their parents in bed with them to help them fall asleep, and that's absolutely fine. But that's called a onset sleep association. And if you are your child's onset sleep association, so for example, if I was to get into bed with my child every night and they would fall asleep with me in bed, it's likely if you're having a lot of disturbances from your child during the night, they're relying on you to help them get back to sleep. So they're getting out of bed, they're looking for you because they find it very challenging to fall asleep without you being there. So I would consider what is helping my child to sleep. And if it is you as an adult that's getting into bed and helping them fall asleep, perhaps it might be something to consider. We need to move away from me being the sleep association and introduce something different instead, such as a cuddly toy or a different part of the routine.
So how do you envision the 3am club supporting parents in Lincolnshire? If money or facilities and things was no problem, what would you like? Dare to dream, Becky.
Dare to dream. Wouldn't that just be
Dare to
lovely?
dream.
If money wasn't an
That's a
issue,
bit of a pun there, isn't it?
yeah,
Sorry.
it really is. No, that's okay. I would just love for the local authority to start really considering the impact of sleep on children. I'd like schools to consider the impact that it's having on children, their cognition and learning. I would love for classes to be available for any parent that had any questions about their child's sleep or would just like some a little bit more information or support with sleep. That is my dream. That is my long-term dream. I my biggest dream is that teaching of sleep becomes an integral part of the national curriculum, just as healthy eating is. You know, sleep promotes health and well-being, and I just feel like there's not enough emphasis on that at the moment in education. And as a teacher myself, you know, it's not really spoken about. It's certainly not on the national curriculum's agenda, and I do believe that that would have a huge impact if children understood themselves why sleep was so important, because not only would they understand why they have to go to bed at certain times, what happens to their body whilst they sleep, but hopefully it would put good practices in place for when they grow up as well.
That's absolutely fantastic. I mean, what good things can you tell us? You know, have you supported families in Lincolnshire, and have they said good things? You know, what's been your feedback from families you've helped?
Yeah, just the feedback that I've had has all been really positive, which is always really lovely because my mission is to help families come up with holistic solutions to help their child with their sleep disturbances. And the feedback that I've had, there's always been positive, and the recommendations that I've put in place when I've considered the family circumstances have always been really well received, and we've had successful results where I've been working with the families. But I think for me, the most rewarding part has been those light bulb moments where I've explained the science of sleep to the parents and I've educated them on what's happening with their child's sleep, and they are there then able to say, oh, that completely makes sense. I understand why my child's having difficulties. I understand why they're finding it hard to regulate themselves emotionally. I understand why they're hyperactive at bedtime. That makes complete sense now. And yeah, so for me, what I'm able to do is by working with these families is giving them the tools that they can implement themselves. So if sleep disturbances do come around again because of illnesses or moving house or different circumstances, they're able to understand what the problem is and they can then have the tools to address that problem themselves in years to come.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And one last thing, what are your future plans for the 3am club? What projects are you working on at the moment you can tell us about?
Well, currently at the moment, I am delivering face-to-face workshops around Grantham. I am moving on to doing some online workshops as well, where I explain the importance of children's sleep and we talk about the science of sleep, we talk about sleep deprivation, onset sleep association disorders, and sleep hygiene and what parents can do to help with their child's sleep. That's one element. I'm also in the process of setting up a WhatsApp community where parents who are struggling with their child's sleep disturbances can come and join the 3am club's WhatsApp community. So at 3am, when they are awake and they feel like they're the only person in the world awake because of their child's sleep disturbances, they've got a whole community that they can talk to and get support from and know that they're not alone. And that stems from me feeling like that when I was going through those sleep disturbances with my child. I felt like the whole world was asleep and I was the only person awake, and I really could have done with just a listening ear or words of encouragement from other people that were going through the same. And that's a free community that anybody can join. I also will be doing some online classes as well. And there'll be details of that on my website. I haven't set a time and a date yet, but my social media pages on Instagram and Facebook is probably the best place to find new events that are coming, and also from my website as well.
Becky, it's been an absolute pleasure. We will put Becky's 3 a.m. club details all on our social media channels and our website. Anybody experiencing these problems can contact Becky through her website, her social media channels, and I'm sure she will be really pleased to have contact with you. But Becky, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Shelley. I really appreciate this time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Links Lives Natters podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with the incredibly talented Becky Jones from the 3 a.m. Sleep Club. All the details of the 3 a.m. Sleep Club will be available on our podcast platforms. If you love what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring you more amazing content and guests like Becky. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, behind the scenes content, and to join our growing community. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. Thank you for my technical team. Until next time, keep this conversation going, and remember, there's always something to natter about in Lincolnshire.